I'm Danny, that witch next door, and you're listening to That Witch Podcast. Well, hello, neighbor. Welcome back to another episode of That Witch Podcast. And if this is your first time at That Witch Podcast, hello, and we are so glad that you're here. I'm Danny, and I'm that witch next door, that gal at the beginning telling you that you're listening to That Witch Podcast. This week, what a week. This week. We had Beltane yesterday, and if you hopefully listened to Moon Day Musings yesterday and our astro forecast for the week, what a week it is, isn't it? We've got all kinds of energy this week, and this episode, today's episode, I hope you are at the very least really, really intrigued, even if you don't know exactly what this is, what this concept is, don't know much about it. Maybe you've never heard of it before. I hope at the very least you're very intrigued. If this is something you are quite familiar with and are working with yourself, I am definitely hoping today's intentions come through and you feel very seen and very validated and very supported in this episode. So it was really cool how today's episode topic came about. It's something I've talked about a lot, sometimes directly, witch wound, sometimes very, very indirectly. And I'm talking about other subjects, other areas of life even, that are definitely linked though, or rooted in the witch wound, that's for sure. I have to tell you though, that this isn't going to be a how-to. I don't have a step-by-step guide. I will give you my experience and my recommendations today. And I'm hopefully going to help you feel a lot more aligned with your own inner power. That's definitely a goal of mine today. But I don't want you to look at this as a practice guide for healing the witch wound, or like a cure, or again, a map even. If you're able to create your own roadmap from what we talk about today, awesome. And wow, I will be so fulfilled and grateful if that happens. But this is a little bit of me storytelling, sharing my experience, and informing, hopefully, many of you. I think that this term is shrouded in a lot of mystery, and not even mystery, misconception for sure. There's a dark veil over it, absolutely. But it is so important because I personally believe, emphasis personal, that this is existent in everyone. But we'll get there in a second. So the way we came up around to this idea and officially put it in the show, it's something that I've thought about, like I said, but for whatever reason, I've never done my own episode on the witch wound. There are several very, very good podcast episodes out there exploring this, I'm sure, one of which I know is Ashley, of course, our beautiful Ashley Michelle of Starseed Shadows. You can listen to her witch wound episode on her podcast, The Goddess Complex. And I very, very much encourage you to explore the witch wound through a variety of perspectives and to not look at this subject as something that you consume start to finish in one place. Technically, we can do that with the definition, I guess, but even that is hard to say. So when we were meeting in the shadow work support group in that witch school for our full-time students, which is our weekly witchy spiritual support group that is included in full-time student enrollment for that witch school. It's an absolutely invaluable aspect and part of the membership that is so hard to put into words how truly beneficial it is. At a recent shadow work group, this subject came up, and this was also a requested episode topic by one of my full-time students, Carly. Hey, Carly. And then I'm so glad that I already told you this, but I'm just so glad that you suggested more on this topic. In shadow work, we were all talking about this. And, it's for being as shared of an experience as it is among the magical community, we really, really don't talk about it enough. We really don't. The witch wound itself is rooted in the stigma around witchcraft. And I would even say shamanism, magical workings, energetic work. It is, the word witch is in it, but it is a large umbrella of a term. And it's rooted in the very, very deeply entrenched stigma that has been present in human nature. I don't even know about human nature. Has been present in human interaction throughout human history, and still very much present around these practices and around these beliefs. This is a discussion and a theology not a theory. It's not a theology. This is a theory. We're talking concept. We're talking theory. We're discussing here. There is no black and white for sure, I guess, definition. It is this shadow, if you will, that exists in all of us. The reason I believe it exists in all of us is because I believe we all reflect one another. And I believe that we are individuals, part of a collective unconscious. And I believe with how widespread this stigma has been, and stigma is not even the right word. It's so much bigger and deeper than that. But for lack of a better term, this stigma is so present and has been present throughout many cultures, throughout many lifetimes, all throughout history. This has been a very long time. And I believe that because of that vastness, that the witch wound exists in all of us on both sides of that same coin, which is on one side, the oppressed, and on the other side, the oppressor. So because I believe in reincarnation, multiple lives, I believe that we have all experienced this on both sides. I don't know that anyone has ever been mutually exclusive one side in all of their lifetimes, all that have ever been and all that ever will be. It just seems pretty implausible to me that we wouldn't have experiences on both sides of this. And the truth is we need to look at that and say, nonetheless, these two sides are of the same coin, and we need to give a shit about the whole coin. Otherwise, we're going to continue neglecting this gaping void of a shadow that is the witch wound. And we're going to continue making it worse instead of stepping into our authenticity while stepping into our humanitarianism and reclaiming our power and healing our witch wound. So, before we go any further, I hope you're really excited to talk about this because I sure am. Before we go any further, I am so excited to talk to you today about our episode sponsor, which is the beautiful, the enchanting, and the lovely Goddess Provisions monthly subscription box. I cannot get enough of the magical products that I get from Goddess Provisions every single month, so conveniently delivered right to my front doorstep. Magic, self-care, me time, my time in practice with the divine. It is so much harder to let that fall by the wayside and to neglect it when I get this just beautiful little monthly surprise every single month right to my door. It is one of my absolute favorite times of the month is getting that little purple box in the mail. And every single month I'm introduced to not just these lovely products that I obviously have a wonderful time enjoying. And I have done tons and tons and tons of magic and divination work with and manifestation and et cetera. But I always find these new spiritual and witchy business owners and companies and makers. And that's one thing I love about Goddess Provisions is every month with their theme, you get a card that not only lists out all of the products, but all of the people that created it and where to follow them, their website. And a lot of them usually come with a Goddess Provisions exclusive coupon code. It's honestly one of those gifts to yourself that just keeps on giving. I don't even know how else to describe it. There's no better way to describe it than that. And, it's just something that I can't recommend enough if you are someone that would really benefit from kind of reigniting that spark in your love for magic every month. It's such a beautiful way to honor yourself and your practice. So you can get yours today at the link in our show notes below. A portion of your purchase helps support That Witch podcast. So it's a wonderful way to not only gift yourself, but to support the neighborhood as well. And Goddess Provisions so generously has given our neighbors an exclusive discount code so you can subscribe and save $5 off your first month with Goddess Provisions with the code SAVE5 TWND, which is That Witch Next Door. So that code is SAVE5 TWND. All of this, the code, the link are in the show notes below. Make sure you subscribe before May 17th so that you get this month's specific theme. And I cannot wait to hear how much you fall in love with your magic and your practice again. So thank you, Goddess Provisions. And thank you, neighbor. Now back to healing our witch wound with one another. I think that a big reason why it didn't dawn on me to talk about the witch wound yet is because it was so much more profound for me when it came up organically in our shadow work support group. So shadow work support group for our full-time students is hosted by one of my very dearest friends and respected colleagues, Reverend Sierra Jolene, who is overall just an absolute spiritual badass. She offers the most amazing one-on-one supportive services, and she shares those with us in the form of the shadow work support group. And the witch wound is definitely something that Sierra and I discuss with each other a lot. We've worked on with each other a lot in our services that we do and work with together. And when it came up with all the full-time students at that week's call, it was so profound. It was like such a full circle moment because that was something Sierra and I had done in our own private one-on-one work together. And then for it to come up in group and for us to get to utilize all the healing she and I had done together and pass that impact on to our shadow work group. And then when our full-time student, Carly, said, I would really love this as an episode, going more into the witch wound, I was like, oh my God, again, yet another opportunity to just keep rippling this out. Because the truth is, the reason that this isn't a one and done conversation is because the more we talk about it, and the sun, just like the clouds just now when I'm recording, just like cleared and the sun just came fucking shining through my window. This is so beautiful. That it just ripples and ripples and ripples out. And the impact is so amplified. And my friends, so much can be healed in this world in healing our witch wound. So much benefit can come from this. There is a lot of xenophobia in the witch wound, okay? There is so much fear of the unknown. And when I say the unknown, I mean capital U, the unknown, the unseen, the unconscious, the dark side of the moon, the dark and hidden secret parts of life, that which we have no control over, but we know exists and we don't know why and we can't explain it. All of these grand terms are part of one of the polarities of the universe, okay? Some people, and for a very long time, would refer to this end of the polarity as feminine energy. I personally refer to this as right-brained energy because I think it is so much bigger than our human definitions of the words masculine and feminine. And so I really like using terminology that gets us expanding far beyond that. And for me, the right brain is, and using a cerebral term like that, humanizes it a lot more and puts us all in a much more collective pool than dividing us, even though this is a polarity we're talking about. We're getting deep today. And that's kind of the beauty when it comes to polarity. And that's what we're kind of exploring with the witch wound today. Polarity exists. Law of polarity exists. There are absolutely opposites in our existence, in our universe. Contrast and opposites are so important. And if this is something that you find really fascinating in and of itself, I highly recommend my episode with Leanne, the 6D manifestation coach and collective channel, who I hosted in January of this year. So you can scroll back to January and listen to my episode with Leanne, because we talk about this and it is an absolutely stunning conversation. It still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. Law of polarity absolutely exists. This contrast absolutely exists. And it is not meant to divide us. If that were the case, if it was meant to constantly divide, we would be separate. And yet we remain so connected, don't we? Polarities remain so connected, don't they? Which is why polarity and duality need to be in the same conversation. And I need you to bring both of those into this conversation about the witch wound. The reason is because when it comes to the I wish there was a big enough term for it, but there's not. When it comes to the myth, to the rumors, to the attitude toward magic, toward witches, toward shamanism, toward the medicine men and women, toward the healers, the light workers, the star seeds. You know, there are two sides in this scenario. There are those being judged and persecuted, and there are those doing the judging and the persecution. And there's that polarity, and there's that duality. Most people, from my understanding, from my experience and learning, most people that either remember past lives or undergo past life regression or, get a past life reading or have an Akashic Records reading that they ask about their past lives and interactions with magic. Most people have memories of some kind of persecution. I am one of those people. When my very first past life regression, one of probably still to this day, and I've done past life regression with Daniel, the past life regressionist, and you can find him on Instagram with that, by the way, Daniel, the past life regressionist. He's been on here a few times. I'm sure most, if not all of you listening, love Daniel. And so if you don't already know, definitely go look up Daniel, the past life regressionist on Instagram. Still to this day, one of my most empowering experiences with my past lives was one very rooted in my witch wound. I experienced torture and execution in that life for my magic and my practice. And quite honestly, more than that, my lifestyle. Because I was alone my entire life. I didn't venture far back enough to witness how that came to be, but I remember very, very confidently having the sense I had been alone essentially that entire life. I was probably orphaned very, very young and essentially fended for myself basically my entire life. And that for the time period that this took place, which was most likely, I've never done enough actual research on some of the garb or clothing that I saw people wearing to verify or get closer to the time period. But this has got to be, I would guess, 13th century, 14th century or so. And my way of life alone, just the fact that I was this woman alone fending for herself and being very upfront and unapologetic about that. That was even if I wasn't practicing magic in that life, which I was, I would have still been branded a witch, just to make that clear. Given the circumstances of the time period. Even though I experienced these really, morbid and dark memories from that life, it was not pleasant, technically. And the reason, and you'll hear why I'm describing it that way in a second, is because I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid for a single moment in that life that I experienced. I don't know that in that life I literally was never scared. I was still a human being. I'm sure I had experienced fear. But probably due to the circumstances of how I grew up, I probably cultivated a lot of fearlessness. And for the by the time I had gotten to the portion of the life that I was recalling in the regression, um, I mean, it was the closest I have ever personally felt to pure fearlessness, ever, ever, ever. In this life, I've never felt that way. And so to get to tap into that feeling and feel that way was extremely empowering, extremely empowering. I don't know how many of us, when we undergo past life regression, again, hypnosis to our past lives, have past life reading, meditate, that whatever it is, whatever it is. I don't know how many of us see ourselves being the persecutor. It's very, very, very hard to allow that kind of truth for ourselves. And that's important when we talk about this. It's almost too hard to be able to see that truth, to allow ourselves to see when we are being the persecutor. But this is a really, really important part of the conversation. As we explore what the witch wound is, and probably your most common experience, which I'm absolutely going to validate every moment of, it's really important that we continue seeing the persecutors in these stories as human beings. Because, again, with the amount of persecution and oppression, torture, genocide, rape, destruction, slavery, racism, mass murder, mass massacre that has existed throughout our history, I'm sorry, but if you're a believer in multiple lives, not a single fucking one of us has a totally clean record. The reason this is so important is because if we cannot get with the fucking program about that, if we can't accept that truth, we are going to keep othering that party. We're going to keep them over there. We're going to keep them labeled the enemy. And you bet your ass we're going to dehumanize them. And what happens is, and we talked about this yesterday? I think on Moon Day yesterday. This births a very, very, very vindictive mindset. A very eye for an eye mindset. Fighting fire with fire. And before you know it, the whole world's blind and we've burned it to the ground. So as I walk you through the witch wound journey from the perspective of the witch, which is going to be where we keep our focus for the remainder of the episode, it was so important to me to remind everybody not to sink automatically into that default setting of positioning the persecutor as other, as enemy, as over there, as separate from me. When if you're a part of the universal collective belief and basically all of the fundamentals that build up the concept of astrology and that we all are connected. Yeah, we have to accept that truth in all areas, and we're rewarded when we maintain our humanitarianism, because this is where we find healing. This is where we're able to step into our authenticity and do it because we're stepping into our authenticity as our divine right. We're not doing it as a fuck you. We're not doing it to punish anybody. We're doing it because it's our divine right and because we want to. And that's fucking abundance. That's the shit our ancestors worked for. So, the witch wound is most commonly experienced outside of a past life regression as a feeling of shame. A feeling of shame and embarrassment, can also even look and feel like imposter syndrome. All of these things related to your magical workings and to your beliefs and your practices. Because this is such a still in the mainstream, just very easy to dog on, very easy to shit on and cast to the wayside and label nonsense and bullshit and pointless. It makes sense that we carry this burden with us when we decide to identify as witch or shaman or energy worker or an ethereal energy practitioner, right? There's so many different terminology. There's so many different terms and labels and titles that could resonate with a person, but a common experience among those people is this shame. This, I feel like I have something to hide. Now, some people refer to this as being inside the broom closet. And they refer to like outing themselves as a witch or owning the fact that they're a witch as coming out of the broom closet. I encourage you to consider the voices in the queer community that are saying this is a little bit of appropriating that term, a little bit of appropriating the term coming out of the closet. And I highly, highly recommend you let that sit with you. Okay. I want you to use terminology that feels right for you and aligns with your values and the people that you also value. And I know that here in the neighborhood, the queer community is a community that we value. And so I just want you to at least open up your heart and consider that perspective and that point of view. You might be part of the queer community and completely fine with people using the term broom closet and coming out of the broom closet. Or it might not feel right to you because it has been really coined by and really in ownership of the queer community since the birth of that term, really. So I just want to put that out there. I don't want to put a blanket statement out there and say you shouldn't say coming out of the broom closet, or you should definitely use that term, or I don't really want to tell you what to do, to be fucking honest. But I do want you to be aware of those views. And I think that in a place where we practice manifestation and spell work and magic, giving a fuck about our words matters and is important. And it's my duty to be honest and open and transparent with you. So it's not a term that I use, but it's also not a term that I shame people for using by any means. And so I just want you to explore that with your own morals, values, and ethics. The term came from, as you can imagine, a very valid experience and a very valid space, okay? people that work with magic and follow the stars and use herbs for their magical properties and work with the natural energy of the earth and our universe around us. There has been and still exists today places where that is literally dangerous. People have lost their lives for these beliefs and for these practices. If you're from a community right now that it doesn't feel safe physically to talk about being a witch, if you live in one of those towns or cities or communities where there's no way in hell you're going to have a local metaphysical store, there's absolutely no way you could tell people this is actually what you do in your free time, and you're afraid to even do, or you're nervous to even do rituals out in your yard in case neighbors see you. I just want you to know, like, I see you. I know you're out there and you exist. We talk about this like it's so in the past. And the truth is, yeah, we've overall made huge fucking progress with it. And it is fucking beautiful. And this is still going on. It really, truly is. And so no matter what, the level that you practice magic and witchcraft, if you live in a place where you feel comfortable speaking a spell out loud, or you live in a place where you have to keep your altar inside a little Altoids tin under your bed because you do not feel safe if somebody found your magical tools, and they would know your belief system, and they would know your views in the universe and how you work in this world. Well, they have judgments about those things. They definitely don't know what your beliefs and your practices are, because that's where the judgment sure comes from, doesn't it? But if you're afraid to be quote unquote found out because it threatens your safety or your serenity, I want you to know, first of all, that no matter how you're practicing your magic, it's effective and it's working. And that's why I call so much bullshit on spell books that tell you have to say it out loud. If you don't say it out loud, it's just going to be a weaker spell. I hate coming across shit like that. I hate when modern books about witchcraft and magic don't give disclaimers like, hey, it's okay if you don't have these ingredients. It's okay if you sub these ingredients. It's okay if you have to ditch any of them. Or it's okay if these aren't even locally available to you and you have to use what is. It's okay if you can't afford this. It's okay if you can't have this in your house or in your space. I wish that disclaimer was out there so much more. That's the first place witch wound healing needs to start, is in our community. We need to be willing to start talking about it and putting our own metaphorical, big, flashing, bright neon signs. Hey, hi, I'm Danny. I'm a witch and I'm healing my witch wound. I'm a safe space to have these beliefs here. This is a judgment-free space. I relate to you. That's kind of the beacon that we all need to start putting out for one another. As we do this, we start really inspiring each other to step more and more and more into our authenticity. When we see other people stepping into their full power and embracing their own authentic codes, we feel like, oh man, they can do it. I know what they've been through. I identify with them a lot. now I can start to see myself doing that too. That makes it feel like more of a possibility for me. It's a fucking beautiful effect that takes place. I became, well, I don't like saying it that way. I rediscovered my magic in this life and began identifying with the title and term witch long before this was my career. So if you are still in the corporate world or the 9-to-5 world, or you just work literally anywhere outside of our spiritual industry, I've been there. I've been there. I've worked in the cubicle and been your friendly local neighborhood witch, which in a lot of ways is where the title That Witch Next Door came from. Because I just always felt like this really like no one ever pegged me for a witch, especially during a certain time in my life where my dress code was my fashion and style was dictated by my dress code at my job, as well as the opinions that I had let of others really get to me and shape of me for a really, really long time. So especially at that time, especially back then, you would never have been able to peg me for a witch. Now, the cool thing was that embracing that name for myself really helped me step into my authenticity in every single area of my life. And it helped me stop being so apologetic for just being me when I was doing nothing else wrong at all. I was just being myself. That's such a common experience of like the witch transition, the witch transformation, if you will, the witch metamorphosis of living a very apologetic life or lifestyle, apologizing for just taking up space, apologizing for just existing the way you were. And sometimes you didn't even apologize. Like, don't think of apology so much as like using the words, I'm sorry. I never literally woke up one day and said, I'm sorry for being me. The way I metaphorically apologized for being me was I started closing up true, real parts of myself more and more and more. I started trying to shrink so many of my traits and qualities more and more and more that I thought were annoying, unvaluable, undesirable, off-putting. And over time, all of a sudden, you realized that there really wasn't that much of me showing anymore. And instead, there was this really curated version. And it's not that I didn't like her. It's just that she wasn't built out of love either. She was built out of shame every step of the way. You know, the more I closed and shut up parts of myself, I didn't do that out of love. You know, you convince yourself that on the outside, you know, but it's not. You do it out of shame. And so I'll never forget, once I started practicing witchcraft for real, I was graced with the notion of starting to not give a fuck. For the first time in so motherfucking long, I started to care less about what other people thought and the judgment they cast on my choices and my existence. And slowly but surely, I started giving more and more fucks about how I felt. what felt right to me. It's really crazy, honestly. It really is crazy. And I think that one of the reasons the witch wound exists is and how this type of persecution came to exist in the first place is because when you're in a really bad, dark, shameful place, alignment and authenticity deeply offends you. That's the fucking truth, man. This is exactly why I wanted to give that disclaimer about we've been on both sides here, because it's super fucking important that we're honest with ourselves about this and we realize that we all have this capacity in ourselves to be this way. When I look on, some of my dark years, if you will, I can think of so many people that I was not even close to my best self towards. Very good people. Very good people I could have continued learning a lot from. That I was just like, fuck you. Because I was pissed. I was buried under my shame and putting mascara on it and curling its hair and saying everything was fine. Like, I really was. And so some of the first healings you do when you start embracing this way of life, this practice, is that shame shield that you've built. It's very hard to deconstruct it, and it's also an integral part of the work. We've done it in other lifetimes. I want to remind you that message just like channeled, like downloaded just so strongly. This isn't the only life you've ever had to do this, okay? It's always been hard. Maybe in ancient enough times before we were able to write what we call written language, because I believe that long ago there was just different forms of communication and we didn't know how to or lost documentation of it. But there's a possibility, that very real possibility, that there were ancient enough societies that really embraced and lived in magic, and it was so much more widespread and it was so much more common to embrace this side of the universe, the mystery, the unknown, and to surrender to it, to see it as dark and beautiful. Just because it's dark, because we can't see through it, doesn't mean that it's not just as beautiful as the light that we can clearly see through. But it has been for a long time now, hasn't it? At least in recorded history. For a long, long time now. Feels very topsy-turvy that way. It feels definitely a little more heavy leaning toward the anti-magick part. And maybe that's because we are in the modern world and we're on that side of things. It's funny when you read history books and learn from historians, and they'll say all these things about ancient societies that just fascinate them and they find so wise. And then every time it comes to their spiritual practices, man, do we fucking write them the hell off, huh? How many times have you heard historians do that? And the truth is that magic is not supposed to wipe out science. Science is not supposed to wipe out magic. I also believe that they are divine polars, that they're divine sides of the same coin. And what magic, man, what profound growth could we and hopefully will we achieve when we do continue merging these two together, and one does not have to disprove the other, because it's not about that at all. I believe they both could so crazy totally enhance each other. Because I believe that they do in the witches and the practitioners who embrace both the science and the magic in life. I found ways. Once I started practicing magic, before I was necessarily calling myself a witch out in public, I remember finding little acts of defiance for myself. Almost similar or akin to like civil acts of disobedience. You know what I mean? Like these not really damaging to anybody ways of rebelling against the norm. And so I would buy jewelry that had certain symbols or pictures or words that were linked to my magic and my beliefs. But if somebody else saw, they'd be able to just be like, oh, that's that trendy, astrology stuff, style, whatever. She's just wearing a constellation. That's just trendy right now. That kind of a thing. I would do that for a while, and that helped. So if you're in that place, that's a great, great place to start. Wearing a moon shirt or buying a shirt with your sun sign or your moon sign or your rising sign or something. I would utilize color magic. And so I'd wear certain colors because I was trying to amplify their intention and really harness their power. But other people would just, think I'm wearing clothes because all clothes have color. Even if it's black or white, just, what I mean? People don't really think of it. I'm wearing jeans and a black shirt and a yellow sweater today. I really, really, really like wearing my yellow sweater when I am doing some solar plexus healing, and I'm really trying to work with self-confidence and self-trust and like trusting and anchoring into my intuition. Anybody else that sees me doesn't think twice about the fact that I'm wearing a yellow sweater. That's what I mean. So that's a really good one. That's a really good one. And you can do that with any of your accessories, by the way. You can bless and consecrate and charge any fucking object that you want to. It can be your water bottle. It can be your wallet. It can be your keyboard. It can be your fucking remote control, your computer screen, the pictures that you hang in your office. You can create sigils that just look and put them on the back of a picture that you keep in a picture frame in your office or your bedroom. There's all these really cool, sneaky ways to still be authentically embracing your magic and feeling really proud of it. So there's those kinds of ways. But what they do is they start paving the way, and this beautiful domino effect takes place. And all those little tiny micro actions of authenticity, of pride in your magic, they start paving the way to more and more and more unapologetic embodiment. This is who I am. And I know the divinity. I know the sacredness with which I practice. I know the fucking love I put into my practice. Believe you me, I know I'm not practicing something fucking evil. When you get to that point, it's a really big growth point, because now not only are you starting to get more and more unapologetic, you're also like, bro, I'm not doing anything wrong. And if anything, I'm putting out intentions for the greater good all the fucking time. So if you have a problem with it, that is a you thing, my friend. That has nothing to do with me. That has nothing to do with me. Because the shit that I'm doing is grand and profound and divine. And yeah, it's really, really important that when people feel put off or scared of or nervous about our magic and our practice and our lifestyle, most people are well-meaning and they're worried about us, and they have not done the deprogramming work that a lot of us have been doing here, right? A lot of us here have been doing that very intentionally for a very long time. And when you have people around you that haven't even begun that deprogramming, and there's still people that truly care about you and love you, yeah, it's a tricky and nuanced situation. And I still want you to see their human coming through. I want you to hold people accountable for their words and their actions toward you. And I want you to uphold the appropriate boundaries for yourself. And I don't want you to use this as automatic. I'm going to cut every single person out of my life if they even have a question about witchcraft, if they, don't even take what I say at face value. Like this is brand spanking new for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And it's really important, especially for those of us that have been kind of deep in our witch wound healing, to remember this. Sometimes when you've gone so far down the rabbit hole, you forget. It's hard to remember that it's like that in the muggle world. Especially when you surround yourself with like such a great community, especially if you like have like a virtual community, like if you're in that witch school, or if you have like a witchy or spiritual social media account and you follow a bunch of people like that and you've made a lot of friends that way, or you're in a great Facebook group like that, or maybe it's even a local group that goes to the same metaphysical shop or metaphysical fair, stuff like that. It's easy to forget outside of that there's so much naysaying and stigmatization still. I want you to still see those people as the humans that they are, with the witch wound that they also carry as well. And by the way, that lashing out that you're experiencing about your practice, bingo, my friend, that is the witch wound. And that's why I said all of that at the very beginning of the episode. We think the witch wound only exists in somebody who's been persecuted for being a witch, and that's the only person who carries that burden. It's not true. Those who have persecuted witches or do, they also carry the witch wound themselves. It comes out and lashes out in the form of a projection of a shadow. It's calling out for healing. And so that's why, again, we still hold people accountable for their words and their actions, and we uphold the appropriate boundaries, therefore. And it's also another person in need of healing. Doesn't mean you got to heal them. Doesn't mean for a single fucking second that's your responsibility to heal them or make sure they get healed. It is perfectly divine and acceptable, just as divine and just as acceptable to wish them well on their way and to keep them out of your life if even necessary. If that's what you need to protect your peace and your safety and your serenity, absolutely get that. I just want us to remember it doesn't exist so black and white like that, that there are only the persecuted and only the persecutors. We've all been on both sides, usually even within the same lifetime, but at the very least, throughout multiple lifetimes. There is no good way to end this conversation, because it's a conversation that shouldn't end. It should stay open. Should be one we keep talking about, should be one we keep asking about. And I really encourage you to talk about this episode. I really encourage you, of all episodes, to send this one to a trusted friend or loved one that you would like to hear their thoughts about all of this on, and keep the conversation going. This would also be a really, really good one to explore further in your journal as well, and keep developing your thoughts and peeling back these layers, because that is what this is. This is an ever unfolding and blossoming flower, and there are layers and layers and layers and layers to the witch wound. And the more we avoid it and cover it up and hide it, the more the wound is just going to fester and get infected and cause all kinds of pain. But the more we turn to it, open our arms to it, and invite this kind of healing and authenticity for all, closer and closer to healing we will continue to get, my friend. It's a journey. It's not a linear destination, okay? Remember that. I hope this episode was at least somewhat informative, inspiring, thought-provoking. I'd love to continue this conversation outside of the show, especially if you're in that witch school. Really love to hear your thoughts inside of our community, what your experience has been with the witch wound so far. Your feelings, your thoughts, and your experiences that you've had so far being a practicer of magic in a very, very non-magical, loving world. You have safe space with me always, and I would love to hear you and validate you. So that space is open. Don't forget, before we go, don't forget to submit your paranormal stories to me. It can be local legend, a local story. You could literally Google one and share with me. I really don't care. I will take any of them, and everything that I've been getting so far is just so juicy, and I love fucking reading through this. So just wanted to remind you all, share with me your paranormal experiences, or the paranormal experiences a loved one's had, or friends had, or that you've heard about, or whatever it is. I cannot wait to hear your stories. Submit them to thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. I am sending you all my love and all my healing, my friends. Thank you for being a part of this magical and divine neighborhood. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week. Stay safe, have fun, and stay magical out there. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed That Witch podcast today, I would be super, super grateful if you would take a moment to head over to Apple or Spotify and leave a rating and review. It really helps to support the show. Or if you just have a friend that you think would enjoy what we're doing, what we're talking about here, you can just share the show with them as well. Now, if you yourself like what you're doing here and you want to get more into the magic of the neighborhood, I highly recommend checking out my monthly membership, That Witch School. It's kind of like a witchier, more interactive style of Patreon subscription, where you can enroll at a tier level that fits your lifestyle and budget. You can get instant access to all of the bonus content that we've already done, as well as all of the future amazing to come bonus content that we'll be doing in the future together. There's exercises for strengthening your intuition. There are loads of resources for studying astrology and learning your birth chart. We've got guest workshops, bonus episodes, exclusive discounts, and so much more. My full-time students also get exclusive access to Mighty Networks, our private online community platform, which is basically like a way better and way more magical social media platform with a bunch of really cool people like you that just want to learn from and support one another on this witchy spiritual journey. If this sounds like something that you would really enjoy, head over to thatwitchnextdoor.com/enroll and explore the tier level of That Witch School that would fit you today. Now, if you have any questions after the episode today, any inquiries, show suggestions, anything you'd like to share with me, you can head over to thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. Remember, I'm just always right next door. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next episode.